All right, folks, let's jump into it. So good evening, everybody. I want to welcome you to our Mythbusting College Admissions webinar this evening. We're really excited that you're going to spend some time with us tonight and really are looking forward to being able to address some sort of common myths and misconceptions about the college admissions process. My name is Tyler Wade. I am an Associate Director of Regional Admissions at Wabash College. So really long title, but basically means I live in Dallas, Texas, and responsible for recruiting students from across the state of Texas. I'm joined this evening by my colleague, Matt Bowers, and I will go ahead and let Matt introduce himself. Then we'll go over some sort of housekeeping items, and then we'll get right into it.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks, Tyler, for getting us kicked off. As Tyler mentioned, I'm Matt Bowers. I'm Associate Director of Admissions here at the college. I'm in my 9th year with the college. I am based on campus, but recruit primarily in Central Indiana, also in Georgia and Florida, working with those students as well. So excited to have you here as well. Thanks a lot, guys.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Matt. So as we get into the evening, just to give some folks some sort of housekeeping items. So Matt and I are going to address some different myths and misconceptions throughout the presentation tonight. We'll encourage folks, if you have questions, to go ahead and submit those using the question and answer feature within Zoom, and we will get those at the end of the program. But just submit your questions as they come up in that question and answer box. It looks like some folks have already found their way to the chat. That's another great way to message us too. We'll try to be sure that we keep an eye on all of those items as we go through the program this evening. So without further ado, we will kind of jump right into it. So to go over a little bit of the agenda for tonight. So these are some of the big myths that we're going to tackle this evening. So the first of those that we're going to touch base on is sort of understanding about public versus private colleges. We're also going to talk a little bit about financial aid, athletic opportunities, how liberal are the liberal arts, some application tips and tricks, a little bit more about rankings and prestige, and then go over sometimes again at the end for your questions and other myths that come across in the college search process. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of where we're heading this evening. So the first myth that we're going to touch base on, myth number 1, public colleges and universities have better facilities, more resources, more degree programs, better faculty, and offer a better college experience. I'm sure a lot of folks have heard that there's this idea that public colleges, which are often bigger than smaller schools, have a lot more resources than small universities. That's why they're bigger and more nationally recognized and prestigious. That is a myth. The truth to that is that facilities and resources at schools like Wabash are just as nice, if not better, than the ones that are found at public colleges. Plus, what's something that is important is that our entire student body has equal access to those resources. That's why visiting campuses are a really important part of the college search process. So what do we mean by this? So, you know, I've heard a lot of times when I talk with students and families, you know, this sort of idea that, well, you know, I'm interested in studying, you know, biology and chemistry, and there are going to be a lot better resources for me to be able to do that at a large state university. And while, you know, they do generally have a bigger endowment, right, more money and resources, a lot of times access to those resources are limited to graduate students at the university. So students aren't actually going to be the ones using the equipment in the labs, right, in the sciences. They'll be watching somebody else use that equipment, right, which is a whole different way of being able to interact with sort of items in a lab setting. You know, our athletic facilities are pretty consistently ranked in the top, you know, 20 in the nation by the Princeton Review. We have a beautiful brand new football stadium that's on our campus, really nice classroom spaces. And so all of the amenities that you would find at a large college, you typically will find at smaller places like Wabash. Now, we don't have like a lazy river, right, on our campus. There's not a rock climbing wall, but there is ample, you know, exercise equipment and dedicated sort of weight training spaces that are available both to our student athletes as well as the general campus community. I think it's also important to not focus so much in on schools that have your attended major, because many students end up changing their mind after they attend college. So I think there's a lot of pressure from society, especially for students to know exactly what it is that they want to study when they go away to college. And you may have heard even from your school counselors well, you need to go to school X because you want to be an engineer. And that's the best way to become an engineer. The fact of the matter is most people actually change their degree path by the time that they get to college or through their first year of college. And that's a lot easier to do at a liberal arts college than it is at a larger university most of the time. So most of the time, if you're admitted into, for example, let's say the business program at a large state school, the vast majority of your classes are going to be 100% related to business. There may be some sort of liberal arts core classes that you take, but it's a much more specialized kind of education. And so if you start down that business pathway and then you get through your first semester or your first year of college and you realize that you hate business or don't really like doing math, right? Well, you kind of can be out of luck and may actually have to start over in your degree attainment process to be able to get a major and graduate on time. Because all courses count towards what we call our distribution or diversification credits at Wabash. If you start down a pathway, an academic pathway, and you realize, well, gosh, I don't know that I like that a whole lot, it's still going to count towards graduating, so you don't lose any time towards your degree completion, and you'll have enough time to be able to complete the degree requirements for the field of study that you end up choosing. One of the other big things that is true about small private colleges like Wabash is that all of our faculty have a terminal degree in their field and teach our undergraduate classes. Classes at Wabash are very small. The average class size is 13. And this is a huge difference between small schools and big schools, is that access to the faculty members. So a lot of times at larger state institutions, most of your classes are going to be taught by a teaching assistant instead of the professor that has a terminal degree in the field. So basically, one of the differences between how faculty are evaluated at larger and smaller schools through the tenure and promotion process, there are three parts that kind of go into that. So there are sort of research components to that, teaching and service. Different kinds of institutions will place a larger level of importance on different parts of that process. So larger research institutions typically evaluate faculty first as researchers and then secondly as teachers. So their job as faculty members is to apply for grants, bring additional funding into the university, produce lots of original research. And so teaching is sort of a secondary responsibility for them. That's why a lot of times those schools are taught by teaching assistants. Those courses, pardon me, are taught by teaching assistants rather than professors. At places like Wabash, we value teaching at the top of that process. Research and service come second and third to that. And so if you're not a great teacher, you won't be promoted and receive tenure at a place like Wabash. Now, that's not to say that our faculty don't do research. They do, and students do that research alongside them as well. But their focus is mainly on teaching, and that's definitely going to be to your benefit when it comes to developing really close relationships with our faculty. The Princeton Review ranks us 4th in the country for our ease of access to professors. And they're going to be a lot better at writing recommendation letters for you, helping you out through the graduate school application process or professional school or whatever it is that you do after Wabash. Our professors are really nice people who definitely go above and beyond to help our students succeed. So I'm going to turn it over now to Matt, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about myth number 2.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. So, I think one of the big pieces that we consistently see across the board is this juxtaposition between private colleges and public schools and the cost. And I think a lot of times this is overblown and sometimes does create more anxiety and limits a student's college search from the get-go. Because I think the biggest assumption is private schools are going to be too expensive and I'm not going to be able to afford it. And I think what you have to dig a little bit deeper. And so the reality is, on the truth in the matter as we're debunking myths and truths, it is often the sticker price of a private college may be more than what you're going to see at a public institution or a large state university. And that generally is going to be the case. But the reality is that it's not going to be exactly what you pay every single time. So the way that colleges work, the way that financial aid works is that every family is unique and goes through a process of not only applying for admission to the institution, but then also applying for scholarships. private schools tend to be significantly better funded when it comes to their ability to provide merit-based scholarships. So as Tyler had mentioned earlier, you know, the endowments of schools certainly help with this because there are a lot more resources at often private universities to be put towards financial aid for students. So the way that a place like Wabash does that is really focusing on the merit-based side. And so what that means is based on the things that you're doing well right now as you're coming out of high school are really the things that we're going to be able to look at to see whether you can be awarded some of these scholarships. Often these scholarships are going to make up for, you know, half or even a little better than half of the direct costs of the institution right off of the top. Another great thing about merit-based scholarships, and this is certainly true at Wabash, is that they're going to follow you for all 4 years that you're at the institution. So it's not a 1-year scholarship and then it goes away. It's going to stick with you for the 4 years that you're at Wabash. And especially it is helpful. You just need to stay in good standing with the college. So coming out of high school, we understand that college is supposed to be harder than high school. We're not going to expect you to necessarily maintain, you know, the same really high GPA that you had coming out of high school, although many of our students do, which is great. But Wabash is certainly difficult. So we offer a wide variety of different merit-based scholarships. These are going to be things that you don't have to pay back, again, that are based on the merits of your application. But then we also include money from the FAFSA. So this is the free application for federal student aid, which for all of those students that are U.S. citizens can apply for need-based aid through the FAFSA to help offset additional costs that may be demonstrated through the family's need. And really, when you look at the combination of both of these types of funding, often what you'll find is that private institutions are probably going to have costs that are comparable to other public colleges who are not going to be providing the same sorts of scholarships overall. I think this last point is really important when you think about the cost of education. I think when you're early in your college search, while I know that cost is a central aspect to most students and families' college search considerations, I think I want to be mindful and tell you that it really is helpful to not make that the main driving force at the beginning. You know, if there's schools that are really interesting to you, have programs of study, have interesting curriculum, have really great outcomes, have really great opportunities for getting you to that next level post undergraduate graduation, keep those on your list and then start digging further into those costs. So the cost of your education is important, but just the same way as we think about a lot of things that we spend money on, you have to find out what your net cost is going to be. The only way that you're going to be able to do that is to go through the full process with us to be admitted to the college and then to receive a full financial aid notification. And so until you get that full written notification from the institution that shows you your net cost for the year, until that time, you don't actually know how much that institution is going to cost. And so making sure that you find your way to that net cost is going to be important. And then once you have those financial aid notifications from the schools that you're really considering, then you really want to dive into really what's the value of the education that you're going to receive, because each school is also going to be having a different college experience. You know, some places you may be able to play athletics, maybe some places you can't. The access to clubs and organizations may differ. And so really, what are you getting for the cost that you're applying for? And, you know, certainly Wabash is a place that we think is very high on our return on investment for what you're paying and what you're getting. The other piece that I would caution you on is really also looking for hidden costs. You know, a lot of private institutions have the ability to really not charge a lot of extra, or as it's been said before, kind of nickel and diming families to death as they move through the schooling process. So look for hidden costs and ask about those things. Typically, there's going to be a lot more to your college education expense than just tuition and room and board. You have to think about books. You have to think about other types of fees like parking. If you go to larger universities, you're probably going to need to pay or at least buy tickets to go to athletic events. There are going to be lab or studio fees potentially, depending upon what your interest or your major may be. As Tyler mentioned, with labs, often you're going to be paying a little bit of extra money and still not necessarily being able to even use those pieces of equipment. So really dig into those things and leverage your understanding and your knowledge and your relationship with the counselors, with the admissions people like Tyler and I, to ask those questions and to dig a little deeper.
Great, Matt. That's absolutely true. All right, so the third myth that we're going to go over this evening are that athletic opportunities are much better at NCAA Division I, II, and NAIA schools because they offer athletic scholarships. So some folks on the call this evening may be interested in pursuing collegiate athletics after their time in high school and have sort of a conception that the ability to compete athletically is going to be much better at a higher level of competition within the NCAA or the NAIA because they offer athletic scholarships. So that's the myth. The truth to that is Division III is actually the largest division for college athletics. So of all the colleges and universities in the United States, the vast majority of them are members of NCAA Division III. Participating at a place like Wabash means that you get to compete at a high level while pursuing an outstanding education that will secure long-term success for you. So the fact of the matter is that very few students that play sports currently in high school are going to go professional in the sport that they play. And that's also true of college athletes as well, right? Most of them are going to go professional in something other than sports, I think is what the NCAA commercial says. And so what you want to do is to be able to set yourself up for success after college. And NCAA Division III schools, places like Wabash, are really good places to be able to do that. You get to compete at a high level. Our sports teams are regularly, ranked in the top 25 in their respective sports. We compete for national championships, both individually and team-wise as well. They win conference championships on a regular basis. There are lots of really great opportunities to be involved in athletic competition at a very high level at a place like Wabash. But it's not going to be the thing that will dominate your college experience, right? Our students at Wabash are true scholar athletes, and scholarship comes first. And so, our classes all take place between 8 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. Athletic practices all take place between 4:30 and 6:30 p.m. So there's a dedicated time for classroom activities, a dedicated time for athletic activities, and then time for you to study after that. And so we definitely put the emphasis on scholar athletes. The other thing that I had sort of said, and just to expand on, your life is not going to be dominated by athletics at a place like Wabash. And so that's going to give you a greater ability to participate in all of the things that are available to students on campus that sort of enrich that college experience. And so, part of going to college should be about having fun. And obviously athletic competition is a good way to have fun, right? But it doesn't necessarily need to dominate, your life 24/7, 365 either. On a college campus, I often say this a lot. I think if you're bored, it's because you're boring. There's always something that's going on, whether there's, a speaker series on campus, a club or organization meeting that's going on, an art exhibition, a music recital, a play, yes, an athletic competition. There's always something that's going on campus, and you're going to want to be able to be involved in those things. Wabash is definitely a place where we celebrate those and students. We don't make them choose and be an or campus. So if you're really involved in football, but you also really like theater, at a lot of colleges, you would have to make a choice. Do you want to be involved in football or theater? At Wabash, we're an and place. And so it's a place where we encourage our students to be involved in things like football and theater. And we help students sort of carve out space and time to be able to be involved in all of those different activities. I think it's also important for folks to have a bit of a reality check and sort of say for themselves, what is the likelihood that you'll be able to compete and contribute to a larger program, and what is the experience going to be like for you? So, are you offered a walk-on or preferred walk-on opportunity to join a large program? What are your chances of making the final roster or earning an athletic scholarship and being able to actually compete and play in the games? Those can make a huge difference in the quality of life, right? Being a practice player, even if that's a really prestigious institution, is a pretty hard life, right? Making sure that you're being involved in athletic competition in a way that you can compete at a very high level and win championships and not just be sort of a practice dummy for other athletes is something that's really important. Another thing that I always like to harp on too about this, I think it's really foolish to make a decision on college based solely on athletics. There are a lot of people that I know. In fact, one of my best friends growing up chose his college because of the opportunity to play a sport, right? And then within the first couple of weeks of him practicing, actually had an unfortunate accident and was left unable to play that sport after that had happened to him, right? And so he had made a college choice based on based on playing that sport and playing that sport alone, and hadn't spent a lot of time thinking about the college outside of playing athletics, and was miserable there after his time playing in sports had ended because he didn't think about all the things that happen after athletics. And so that's sort of a cautionary tale, but one that I think is really, really important for you all to hear, is that, you want to be sure that you choose a college that you would be happy going at, even if your dreams of competing in athletics end up not coming to fruition.
Yeah, absolutely, Tyler. I think that last point you made is something that resonates so often with students, and especially young men as they're looking at schools. Myth number 4, I think, is certainly one that I hear more often these days is that liberal arts college push impractical education. And that it's going to leave you or the son unable to find a job after college. And really that, especially in these political times that we have, to indoctrinate into the liberal agenda. And the reality is that is completely false. It is a myth. The basis of the liberal arts is really classical education. It's one of the oldest forms of academic programming. So it's focusing on a variety of subjects, from the fine arts to social sciences to physical sciences. So really a lot of the things that you're currently doing in high school now. But really the term liberal actually comes from a Latin word liber, which means free and unrestricted. So the reality is, as you're studying these various ideas and these various programs, you're free to explore and to move between them kind of seamlessly. So, I remember being in school and walking from a biology class to a philosophy class, that were back to back. And so having that freedom and that unrestricted access to that education is important, versus a non-liberal arts education that's going to be more technical, that's really going to be designed at kind of the professional level. So you think about like medical schools or business schools or technical programs in maybe like engineering or skilled trades. That's really the largest difference. I think the liberal arts, and especially the liberal arts at Wabash, is designed to make you a multifaceted individual. It's to provide you with a basis of being able to look at problems from a lot of different areas. And really, I think what professional schools, what graduate schools, and what employers are looking for are critical thinkers, problem solvers. They're strong communicators. And that's the basis of a liberal arts education. You're going to have classes that are smaller, that are being taught by professional PhD faculty members that are going to challenge you. And the fun part of it is you get to challenge them as well. And so this exchange of ideas and this discussion-based learning really helps build that relationship. And it's not just between you and a professor, it's also going to be between you and the other students in the class. understanding that dialogue and conflict and disagreement are a part of human nature and are part of doing these things is really important. And when you come into this liberal arts tradition, as Tyler had mentioned, you can spread kind of what you're interested in doing. And so you come in with maybe one interest area that you find that you don't really like that much. You have the flexibility in a liberal arts curriculum to find what you're really passionate about. And I think that passion is really what needs to drive more people. You can be passionate about, making a lot of money, but normally it's not people who are passionate about making money that end up making a lot of money. It's people who are passionate about what they're doing and turn that and monetize that and end up making money that way. And so I think the quality of life is really important. One of the greatest things that I like about some of the rankings for Wabash actually came out of Forbes. And it's that we have the happiest and most successful alumni in the country. We're number 9 on that list. And so, the ability for guys to come in, develop their passions, and then consistently being able to meet with people outside of kind of just the small group of people that they live with or outside of their family, and work with mentors, with career services, connecting with alumni, and then really working on co-curricular programming, but also internships and real world experiential learning. Experiential learning seems to be a hot kind of word these days in higher education. And I think the reality is Wabash has always been steeped in experiential learning. We haven't ever thought that there was another way to do it. It's why 93% of our students had internships last summer. And so the reality is that you're going to get those really fundamental skills inside the classroom. And then through connections and through leveraging those connections, you're going to be able to find employment and internships quickly and really with some ease as you come out of Wabash. I think the great thing that we see is that we're consistently putting guys into their first destinations at an extraordinarily high rate. Right now, our average is 99.5% of our students have their first destination within 6 months of graduation. Comparing that with 59% as a national average, the reality is that your ability to get out and do what you want to do, to not be stifled by having to take more classes to complete your degree program, and to not have to move home with your parents when you're done to sort things out, is certainly a part of the liberal arts education, and especially at a place like Wabash.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Matt. Okay, so our next myth that we're going to address is if I don't look like the perfect student on my application, there's no chance I will be admitted. Gosh, this is one I hear a lot of times, right? Students are really, really concerned about the application process and feel like there is sort of a set formula or game plan that they have to go through in order to be admitted to a college or university. And while that may be the case at some colleges and universities, it's actually a lot lower than I think people often think. So the truth behind that. So colleges have different processes for reviewing applications, and it is important for you guys to ask how that process works. Matt has heard me say this probably 1,000 times, if not more. I work in the admissions office at Wabash. I don't work in the denials office at Wabash. And so when I read an application, I am reading an application with the goal of building as strong a possible case as I can as to why a student should be admitted to Wabash. And so we do that using sort of a holistic method when we look at your application. So we're going to look at the application itself, right? What is the information you provide to us on your physical application? What kind of activities are you involved in? What kinds of classes have you taken in school? We are test optional, but if you provided test scores, we're going to take a look at those test scores. We're going to read your essays and recommendation letters fully. We're going to use, sort of conversations that we've had with you or experiences that we've had with you as well. And all of those things are going to go into helping us make an assessment for why we feel like a student should be admitted. And when we go to our boss and build a case for a student being admitted, we want to have as many data points as possible to be able to go through that process. That's what's called a holistic review process. Not all colleges and universities use that method, right? So one of the some universities actually will sort of say, if you don't have these basic GPA and standardized test score, they're not even going to go through and read the rest of your application, right? But again, like I had sort of said before, the actual number of ones that do that is pretty low, and it's probably less prevalent than you feel like it is. We want to be sure that we are admitting students to Wabash who are likely to stay at Wabash and to be successful and graduate on time. But that doesn't mean that you have to have a flawless record. So, we know that there are lots of things that can happen on the way to a grade point average. So maybe you started school and you didn't really value sort of working as hard in the classroom, right? And so you sort of felt like that school wasn't important. You were busy worrying about sort of other things, right? And your grades suffered at the beginning, but you figured out that, hey, paying attention in school is important. And so your grades have gotten better over time. That is awesome, right? That's exactly what we want to have happen. And we kind of can take a favorable look at that and say, well, gosh, this is a student who seems like they have the ability to be successful at Wabash. They've demonstrated that their grades have gotten better over time. And so that's a student that we're more likely to recommend to being admitted. COVID has had a huge impact on our society at all levels, right? Students, you all may have been taking classes for a long time in a virtual classroom setting. It can be really hard, I know, to pay attention in a virtual classroom setting. Maybe some really, sort of tough things have been going on in your home life, right? A parent has lost their job or had their hours cut. You've been going through some financial hardships. And life happens, right? And it's important that you let folks know that in the college application process, because again, that's all stuff that we can take into consideration when we are evaluating your application and sort of building that story, because we recognize, this has been really tough for everybody, right? And it's important for us to be able to sort of suss out what's going on in that process so that we can be effective at advocating for students to be admitted. Before I'll turn it over to Matt for the next myth, really appreciate all of the ones that are coming in to us. And we will go over these questions and answers at the end of the session. So keep them coming and we'll be sure to address them at the end. So Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Tyler. I appreciate that. So this is another, I think, common thing, and the more that we see this, rankings especially continue to come out. They're updated every year. I think national prestige is another one of those things. It seems that they're very important in order to help you find a job or to get into a good graduate or professional school. I think the reality is that's a myth. The truth in the matter is that professional schools and graduate schools and employers, they're looking for the best candidates for their positions. And while, rankings or prestige may come into play to some degree with certain employers as they're going through the process of expanding whittling down the candidates, it's not going to be the biggest factor. That's part of the reason why you do interviews, and it's part of the reason why you go and you meet the people that you're going to be working with. The reality is that when you go to apply for jobs or get into graduate schools, you need to have the basics down. So if it's graduate or professional programs, you need to make sure that your prerequisites are done. You need to make sure that you scored well, potentially on your GRE or on the entrance exams for those schools, the Ncaa or the DAT or the LSAT for those various programs. That's going to be one piece of it. But then you're also going to want to make sure that you've been networking, that you've been interning, that you've been providing meaningful experiences to your education that you can demonstrate to these employers. So that they know that not only are you serious about the work, but that you also understand what it's all about. And I think one of the other things that I think really comes into play is as you come out of school, you're competing for similar positions. So, if you go to a really prestigious school, and I guess it's perceived prestige, but if you go to a really competitive school with a really low admissions rate, you do concentrate the number of people that are competing for similar types of jobs. And so one of the other pieces that professional schools, graduate schools, and employers are looking for is diversity of thought, is not only the people diversity, but diversity of thought. And so if you go to these institutions, you're going to learn the same way. You're going to learn from the same people. You're going to learn similar aspects and similar types of ways of thinking. And so, employers, graduate schools, and professional schools want to have people who are going to come in and have different types of thought. And so, having the ability to think critically, to problem solve, be responsible, to lead, and have well-rounded experiences, those are the things that drive the hiring and admissions processes. And a huge piece that I don't think often gets talked about is, you're going to have to like the people that you work with. And so hiring committees are going to want to find people who are sociable, who can certainly do the work, but have some fun stories, have some ability to connect with their admissions, with the interviewing committee, to be able to think about, what they would do. Is this somebody that I would go to dinner with after work, or, could I grab a beer with them, outside of the office? And, those things certainly play into the mix as well. And I would say ultimately probably have have a larger impact on your ability to get those jobs than really where you came from. I think, having some of those prestigious names, I think may make people feel good, and you can certainly put those things on the wall. But in terms of the reality of getting really strong jobs, we are consistently seeing that students coming out of Wabash are being placed at really high positions, thinking about Goldman Sachs, running Fortune 500 companies, starting companies of their own. And so it's really about their experiences and their collective understanding and ability to do the job, to innovate, and to get better. And I think the reality is this is just a reiteration of what I said earlier. Coming out of Wabash, we are proving that students, you come into Wabash, you go to a small school, we're proving that what we're doing works. What we do at Wabash, the way we educate young men, it works. And so again, 99.5% of guys within 6 months know where they're going to be. They're either working, they're in professional school, they're in graduate school, which leaves only a handful of guys that are still working through that process just 6 months after graduation, and they're not floundering on their own. These are all students that our career services people know about. They're actively working with them. And, the funny thing is some of them have actually turned down job offers. So it's just that they haven't accepted a job offer at that point, not that they don't have any options. And so I think that's another really important piece is, I think that there are some things that people really put a lot of emphasis on. And I think a lot of times it's fun to be able to say, that you're going to these types of places, but I think the long-term outcomes for our students certainly stack up with any institution that would be put up against us. And so I think that's one of those areas as you're looking and as you're thinking about prestige, while there may be something to that, the reality is you need to see what a school's outcomes really look like, whether it's a public school, whether it's a private school. And you also need to be thinking about it specifically in terms of students like you, where you're coming from, who you are, the things that you're interested in, not just the school at large. And so really being able to get at those pieces is important.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Matt. All right, so those are the ones that we had planned to kind of go over this evening with you all. You guys are doing a great job submitting some questions. And so what we're going to do now is I'm going to read these questions, and then Matt or I or both of us will sort of answer them if we have anything to add. So the first question we had, and this was answered in the chat, but just wanted to call it out so that everybody got the answer to it, was a question about whether or not students apply for scholarships given by Wabash before actually applying to the school, so applying for admission. Matt, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, so the way that Wabash works is the first and most important thing is to apply to the college and be admitted to the college. So you have to be admitted before any of your information will be transferred over to be screened for scholarships or anything like that. So once a student is admitted to the college, then we begin our financial aid process. That financial aid process does include screening students for merit-based scholarships. Those are available on our website under our financial aid tab. So you're scanned automatically for what you're eligible for those scholarships. And then we do have a couple of other opportunities that do require a little bit of extra input from you. So our Wabash Lilly Award is a full ride scholarship. It does require an additional application, so you do fill that out. We actually will notify students when that's available. Typically, it's not until later in the fall. And then we also have our Honor Scholarship Weekend. It takes place on December 10th this year. So that'll be an opportunity for you to come to campus and you actually compete for scholarships at that time by sitting in on a class, doing a discussion, and then actually writing an essay response to the class that you participated in. One of the nice things is for students this year that are able to attend that program, you're actually going to be guaranteed some scholarship money in the form of $500. But you do have the ability to compete for full tuition scholarships. Last year, we awarded 2 full tuition scholarships at that weekend. Outside of that, we really are going to focus on need-based aid. So you need to complete a FAFSA for all of our U.S. citizens. You need to complete a FAFSA. You can start doing that in October. So you start that process, and then the combination of those two things will be put together by our financial aid folks to get you a full financial aid notification.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. So our next question is, how does Wabash College evaluate international students who need financial aid? Does Wabash College meet 100% need of international students? So there's a really great section on our website that sort of addresses this question. If you go to wabash.edu/admissions, there'll be a section for international students. But basically, Wabash offers pretty generous merit and need-based scholarships for international students as well. International students have to fill out, as part of the application process, the International Student Financial Aid application. Basically, we need that completed information. So savings, investments, salaries of your family, et cetera, so that Wabash can best assess a student's financial need. Typically, our need-based packages may consist of a combination of on-campus employment and a very limited number of grants, in addition to any need-based scholarships that may be awarded. Travel expenses and any kind of summer expenses are not covered by an aid award. In order to be consideration for admission and financial assistance, all applicants must be able to document the ability to provide for expenses not covered by even our best awards. Our colleague, Chris Dixon, is the international admissions specialist. He does a fantastic job working with our international applicants and would be really great at answering sort of more specific questions, but hopefully that answers it a little bit more broadly. Our next question was one about sort of classroom learning. So the question was, are the majority of classes conducted in seminar and/or Socratic method form? And if so, do those classes start the freshman year?
Yeah, and so I think, so I'll jump in. So yes, the answer is yes on kind of all fronts. So yes, the majority of classes, all classes at Wabash are going to have a discussion or Socratic method to them. Now, some of your introductory level courses, especially in the sciences and economics, math, physics, some of those, there is going to be a lecture component to those. There is still a lot more give and take. So it's not like you just sit mindlessly digesting, the transparencies or the slides that are being put up on the screen. You're still interacting. The professors are asking you questions. But in those classes specifically, you're going to have a mandatory lab component as well. These lab components are going to be small groups. So again, our average class size is 13 students, but some of our introductory classes may be 30 or 40 students. And then the lab sections, or if they don't have a lab, they'll break into like smaller groups for discussions and projects. And those groups will be, small, or lab sections can be as many as 15 students. So So that's really how that breakdown works. But yeah, all 4 years that you're at Wabash, from your first day to your last day, you're going to be discussing in class, which can be a change from high school. But I think it's really a welcome change. It certainly was for me, and I think it is for the large majority of our students. It's a good question.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Okay, our next question. How does it feel like to be an international student within the Crawfordsville community? How inclusive is the community for international students or foreign individuals? This is a really great question. The first thing I would say is that Chris Dixon would be a great resource to be able to help you get connected with current students who are international students who would be able to give you sort of their firsthand experience. I will sort of speak based on what it is that I know, but like I said, Chris will do a great job at being able to get you in touch with students who can speak specifically from the international student perspective. You know, Crawfordsville is a small community, right? There are about 15,000 people that live in Crawfordsville. We're located just outside of Indianapolis, about 45 minutes outside of Indianapolis, which is about the 15th largest city in the country. Crawfordsville, Indiana is sort of your prototypical small Midwestern city, right? There are families in our community from all, you know, racial, ethnic backgrounds, socioeconomic circumstances. You know, there are folks from sort of all walks of life that are present in the Crawfordsville community. And a lot of them are really, really supportive of what happens on our campus, right? There are host families within the community that will sort of take in international students that come to Wabash to be able to help them, you know, to sort of have a home away from home, to be able to go to places to get, you know, a really good meal. You know, there's a pretty strong and vibrant international student community on our campus. And, you know, a pretty, you know, vibrant international community, especially in Indianapolis, on the west side of Indianapolis, which is the side of town that's closest to Crawfordsville, on 38th Street. There's a really awesome sort of international market that has all kinds of restaurants in it. Basically, it's a couple, you know, city blocks, probably about a mile or a mile and a half of different restaurants from all parts of the world, grocery stores, places where our students go to be able to eat a meal that reminds them more of their home countries, or to buy sort of ingredients that they can come back on campus and make meals as well. And so, you know, I would say it is generally a welcoming environment on campus within Crawfordsville itself. You know, I'm not going to sort of say that there aren't sort of folks that have racial bias in the Crawfordsville community, like there are sort of everywhere in the world, really, right? But I think that lived experience of students would go a long way into sort of helping assuage some concerns about what that may be like. I don't know, Matt, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I think that was really well said. I think that our students, all of our students feel safe on campus. I think they feel very safe within our community. We have the benefit of having the mayor of Crawfordsville being an alum of the institution, and so has regular conversations with the president of the college and other constituencies at the college as well. And so I think that our students really do feel comfortable and safe on campus. But I think the best way, and Tyler already alluded to this, is you know, neither of us is really going to be able to speak to that exact lived experience. And so talking with students, you know, connecting with Chris and having him connect you with students who are international students on campus is going to be absolutely the best way to get a real perspective on that.
All right, so we've got about 9 minutes left until the top of the hour. So if folks have questions, continue to submit them and we'll try to get through them as quickly as possible. So the next question, what are some common internships that Wabash can connect a computer science student with? And do you still offer liberal arts scholarships through theater, art, or music? I think the second part of that question is referring to the fine arts scholarship program that we used to have at Wabash. We no longer have a dedicated scholarship competition for the fine arts. For the first half of that question, common internships that Wabash can connect a computer science student with. So computer science is a fairly new academic program at Wabash, especially as a major. And so off the top of my head, I can't recall a lot of really specific computer science type internships. You know, I do know that we have students who are interning with a company in South Bend called Trek 10. That Wabash has worked with as well, that sort of is a data analytics firm, and students work with them on some of their business practices. They were really helpful in helping us develop some data models around sort of predictive modeling on terms of projecting enrollments at the college. And so, there are students that work with them on those sorts of activities. We have a company in town that does like a cybersecurity, safe hiring solutions opportunity. I think that the best thing for the student who had asked this to do is to talk to your admission counselor specifically about that. And they're going to be able to connect you sort of more specifically to those alumni who offer internship experiences in that computer science field.
And one of the things that's fun is just the ability to actually find, and working with career services, to find opportunities, because you're not going to walk into career services and they just give you a static menu of like, here are your options. Students find opportunities and find opportunities within their office, but also outside of their office that they help you work through. So it's really great. I guess, Tyler, I can read the next one. Looks like what's the best way to prepare as a prospective student for Wabash? And I think the best way to prepare is number one, to make sure that you're visiting, that you're going through the application process. But outside of that, I think the big transitions coming out of high school, moving into college, are not necessarily unique to just Wabash. I think it's really important to keep track of a calendar, to do a good job of keeping track of the things that are going on. Maybe you expand that a little bit so that you take care of, planning, the weekly activities for your family for a week, potentially planning out meals, thinking about some of those things. Time management tends to be the thing that really gets guys right off the bat. Because you go from an environment where you've spent 7 hours a day in school, being able to learn and do work, to an environment where really you're in class maybe 2 hours a day. And so utilizing that downtime and having a plan for that is really what's going to be most important. And reading, I think just kind of anything that you like to read, read for fun, read for school, read different types of things. So the news is an important thing to think about. I think Wabash has a really good track record of kind of always talking about things that are going on in current events. So that's another good place. But just anything else you would add?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, you're hitting the nail on the head. All right, Matt, do you want to answer this one? Can I still participate in theater performances even if I do not major or minor in theater?
Yes, Jonathan, you absolutely can. So there are no prerequisites for any participation with activities on campus. There are a couple of exceptions. So the Sphinx Club is one opportunity that you do have to be a second semester sophomore before you can apply to be in the club. But that's about the only one that I know of as well.
Awesome. So our next question: to what extent is homophobia still prevalent at all male colleges like Wabash? I think this is a really awesome question. And what I would say to this is, like America, Wabash has come a long way in this, in the recent history, right? What I actually went to Wabash, so Matt and I both did. I graduated in 2012. Matt graduated in 2008. One of the things that and I was pretty heavily involved in student government at Wabash, and one of the things that I was a part of was actually elevating our sort of Gay Straight Alliance organization, which is called the Shout Club at Wabash, SHOUT, like the laundry detergent Shout, and elevating them to the senior council, which sort of the heads of those organizations are the student organization leaders on campus. And so we felt like it was really important to shine a greater light on, our gay and bisexual, friends that are on campus, students that are on campus, and be able to elevate that conversation to a higher level. And so I was instrumental in making that happen on the senior council level. The Shout Club is pretty vibrant on Wabash's campus, I would say. They've got, a really great faculty advisor. They offer programs on campus on safe sex, sort of question and answer sessions on sort of what is it like to be, an LGBTQ individual, being able to kind of look at different ways that we consume media. I think the dialogue is really elevated around the experiences of gay folks at Wabash, and feel like that we have really come a long way towards sort of rooting out homophobia on campus. Now, that's not to say, again, sort of like I'd answered before with international students, I'm sure that there are occasionally, things that happen that aren't great, but I think our students do a really good job of policing that sort of activity amongst one another and squash those things out pretty quickly. And it's definitely something that we as a college administration take pretty seriously as well. But I feel like it is definitely a really safe place for students. When I was a student, I had a handful of fraternity brothers who were gay, and feel like they, had great experiences on campus. All right, so we've got 2 minutes, and I think we've got 2 more questions. So the first one, Wabash Lilly Scholarship and Wabash Honor Scholarships available to only U.S. citizens, or are they available to international students as well? Matt, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so they are. So as Tyler had mentioned, so kind of applying through the international process has a few additional has a few unique steps to it. And so working through Chris, the Lilly Award and the Wabash Honor Scholarships are just for U.S. citizens at this point. So there are additional opportunities for international students, but I would encourage you to connect with Chris so that he can fill you in further on some of those processes. So it also says,
yeah, sorry, I was throwing, I put a thing in the chat really quickly with a link to that international admission page that speaks more specifically to those scholarships.
Absolutely.
Okay, the last question we've got submitted. What type of information do you look for in an essay, and do you prefer recommendation letters?
Yeah, so I think essays, so number one, I don't necessarily have preferences per se. I think that the quality of the references and the quality of the essay are really what's most important. So when it comes to an essay, I want to hear something unique. I want to hear something that's not already in your application. And quite frankly, we read countless hundreds of essays every single year of students who have been hurt, have an athletic injury, and that's what they overcame, and that's what gave them perseverance. So that's a pretty tired essay topic. So I would encourage you to find unique ways. If that's really what you want to talk about, that's fine. But find a unique way to talk about it, and maybe spend less time talking about the injury and how much you love the sport, and more about really your fundamental changes in who you are as an individual. And it's similar for the references. Make sure that it's people who really know who you are and are going to write a strong recommendation about who you are. I think these are areas where sometimes it's more about character maybe than it is about academic performance, because the academic performance piece is going to be on your transcript. So if they can talk about special projects that you've done, particular leadership, particular compassion, or a lot of those perseverance characteristics, leadership characteristics, things that colleges and universities want to see in their student bodies, those are the types of things that we want to see. But yeah, a great question as well. Our essay is optional, as are references. So you don't have to submit those, but I will say I highly encourage you to do all of those things. When you read the requirements for an application, when you see the word optional, unlike sometimes in high school, I highly recommend that you complete those optional items because it will really help those admissions offices in understanding who you are as a student and an individual.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Matt. Well, I don't want to take up too much of folks' evening. So really, really appreciate you spending some time with us here this evening. We know that the college search process can be sort of overwhelming and stressful, and we like to sort of take every opportunity we can to kind of de-stress that process for families and address some common myths and misconceptions. Down in the chat, I put Matt and I's email addresses. So I think Matt and I are going to stick around for a little bit to answer any kind of like last minute questions that sort of came up. But if you have to go, feel free to send Matt and I an email, and we'll be happy to answer those offline. So thank you so much for joining us here this evening. I will stop recording, and then